Smith.
Here.
Connor Coleman.
Here.
Can you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have public participation and recognition, public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not allowed. We start with Herbert Rubin, and this is on budget and cuts district students. Sorry.
I just flunked in my medical office. I couldn't read my emergency contacts. Oh, that's really convenient. Anyway, thank you. Several of us commented on the harm done, especially in the minority communities, by the search for out-of-district students. That search discovered that the number of out-of-district students is dramatically below what advocates of the search claim, and continuing inquiry seems to be lowering the number even further. The search for out-of-district students was in part justified by claiming that eliminating out-of-district students would save money and reduce taxes. And justifying the search, dramatically inflated figures of potential savings were put forth. Meanwhile, our own analysis indicated the school district most likely would lose revenue. To check out these findings, I suggested to Superintendent Nathan that the district should provide its own estimates. The financial office reported that if 10% of the students, 600 or so, were out of district and asked to leave, the school district would lose, let me repeat, lose $1.7 million in revenue. It has been reported that there was most 313, maybe I'm off 1 or 2, students whose families did not yet demonstrated that they were residents. That number is still going down as families provide further information. The financial impact of losing these students would result in losses to the overall school district revenue. Our estimate, and this is ours, not the school district, is that if 300 students were to leave, the school district would actually have $500,000 less in revenue, and in addition would be out of pocket for the cost of the search and for any hearings or litigation that would be likely to occur. Taxpayers have been fooled into thinking that kicking out students will reduce taxes. In the name of transparency and the name of honesty, the school district must provide to the public the actual budget implications if that smaller number of out-of-district students are removed. We assure the school confirm that the school district will not gain financially, but rather come up behind. Continued failure to provide this information makes the school board a conscious part of the deception that has confused community members. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next, we have Laura Vasquez, and this is on residency check.
Yes, I'm reading a statement on behalf of David Barrow, who couldn't be here tonight. David asks this question: why is the letter sent out to residents questioning the eligibility of their students was the following language from the school board's own policy manual omitted? Quote, person asserting legal custody over a student who is not the child's natural or adoptive parent shall complete a signed statement stating that he or she has assumed and exercises legal responsibility for the child. B, the reason the child lives with him or her other than to receive an education in the district. And C, that he or she exercises full control over the child regarding daily educational and medical decisions in case of emergency. If the district knows the current address of the child's natural or adoptive parent, the district shall request in writing that the person complete a signed statement or power of attorney stating A, the role and responsibility of the person with whom the child is living, and B, that the person with whom the child is living has full control over the child regarding daily educational and medical decisions in case of emergency. This option, which does not call for the production of other documents, would seem to be an important alternative for residents who, for many reasons, might not have the documents requested in the letter that was sent to the 300 families or so that were just alluded to. Shouldn't the district supply this omitted option to recipients of the letter since it could directly affect how they choose to respond to the letter. Moreover, should the deadline for responses be extended until this information is made available to those who received the letter? Thank you.
Thank you. We have David Becker, and this is a request regarding the lawsuit.
Thank you. This is similar to some of the statements that have already been made, but as a parent and a concerned citizen, I'm here tonight to make 4 requests regarding the JDO lawsuit and the current contract with National Investigations Incorporated. First, I'd ask that the board do everything in their power to move the case with JDO to dismissal. The JDO case is based on false claims and even faultier math. Even the most conservative financial estimates show that to remove students from the district does not save money, but is instead a financial expense. There's no demonstrable benefit to our students, our families, our community, or our taxpayers. Any outcome other than dismissal of the JDO case is unacceptable. Second, I ask the board to end the contract with National Investigations, Inc. Using a private investigator to follow our students and question our families is unnecessarily invasive and unnecessarily divisive. I ask that the board not extend this contract into the upcoming school year. Third, I ask that the board ensure that all families are receiving the most accurate information about the board's own policies and procedures for meeting and establishing residency. That information is made as readily accessible as possible. And lastly, I ask that the board bring as much of this conversation as possible out of closed meetings and into open session. Although there is certainly client-attorney privilege that must be respected while the court case is still pending, there are decisions that are being made that impact our children, our families, and even the board's own goals, such as the diversity plan, the discussion last board meeting related to increasing the diversity of our AP courses. Those are undercut and undermined by families feeling as if they're being targeted, and unnecessarily so. So that even that these decisions are being made that impact our children, our families, and even the board's own goals, and should not be decided in closed sessions. This process should be as open and as transparent as possible. Thank you.
Next, we have Cassie Winchell, and this is on residency check.
Hi. I attended the June 19th District 428 school board meeting and declined to voice questions or concerns about the district's residency check because I anticipated Mr. Tom Lester addressing my needs in his presentation. I was left wanting, and after studying my notes, I have more questions than I walked in with. Here are the most pressing. 1. Faced with a deeply flawed lawsuit in which JDO suggested that many students are studying in our district and residing elsewhere, the school board asked that the suit be dismissed. The court requested that JDO amend the suit. Perfect. But then, because they couldn't say definitively that residence violations are not a problem, the board decided in closed session to hire a private firm to prove that it is. I've looked into national investigations and they clearly seek positive results. And I've been unable to make sense of this decision, and I wonder if you'll please help me understand. My second question. There are definitely families who mistakenly received the letter that so offended my friend Nancy Richardson. She's my friend and she's my neighbor. It seems like Superintendent Craven signed and mailed letters without any school staff ever viewing the list. And that possibility confuses and stresses me because demographically, I wonder what the group of letter recipients looks like. According to our district's most recent report card, our student population is 49% white, 18% Black, 26% Hispanic. 60% of our students come from low-income families. But we're a much greater percentage of the letters received by lower-income families. We're about half the letters sent to white families. Is there any chance that this mailing list might be viewed as discriminatory? My perception is that a flawed complaint by JDO has been given undue credence, and I fear that care may not have been taken to avoid a more legitimate complaint. And I really hope I'm incorrect. My third question is similar to Mr. Becker's. When will the public have an opportunity to dialogue with the board and with Superintendent Craven regarding the residency check? Public comment at monthly board meetings is insufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have board committee reports and correspondence. Anybody have any?
Thank you. I just want to thank Jenny Hubert. She was at the Human Rights Committee and gave this presentation on diversity. She did a really good job, and I think as a board, we should really thank Jenny. She was asked a lot of questions that went beyond the diversity. Obviously, the pending lawsuit that we have. But what I saw with Jenny is that she stuck with the diversity plan. She helped the committee understand where we're headed with this. And I really love the atmosphere and climate she created in that committee and helped us see and understand what the goal is for our board. She did, take in some questions and wrote down additional questions, but I want to thank her. I think that she goes above and beyond what we asked, and obviously she had to fill in for someone else, but she did a beautiful job. So I just thank you, Jenny.
We have a presentation, and this is a discussion informational item, tax increment financing tip presentation. Mr. Gino Gulito.
Thank you. I brought a PowerPoint just to put up, kind of walk through, and by all means, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to slow me down. I've been working with Jamie directly and Cindy Carpenter both in meeting with the school district since we last met. I was here last in March, and since then we also received from the school district an eligibility report. Should we go to the next slide, please? So I think tonight's goals are to identify where the city is in their TIP creation process for the central business district, to discuss our options. Our options are generally to support, oppose, or do nothing. To identify some considerations that you might want to consider in making your decision on what to do, and to generally get some direction back to the board and answer any questions so that we know how to proceed from here as we continue to move forward, given the timeline that the school district, that the city has in creating the TIP. Go to the next slide, please. Just for a refresher, the dark green on the right is TIP 1. The light yellow at the bottom is what's called TIP 2 in the city of Dekalb. And the red outline, which is 99% part of parcels that are currently in TIP 1, is the new TIP they're proposing. Okay, so just from a lay of the land. TIP 1, it might be kind of hard to read from here, but TIP 1 was created back in 1996. TIPs are typically 23 years. That TIP had an extension to it. It got passed through the legislators. I think there was an IGA to get school district support back then, again, 07. And that's why while it was created in December 1986, my eyes were bad, I'm sorry, it's 1986. It expires in 2021. So it's a 35-year elected term. TIP 2 down at the bottom was formed in 1995, and it's going to end in 2018. It's a 23-year TIP. This year, at the end of this year, will be when it ends. The last dollars for any TIP, when it ends, will be collected in the following year. So TIP number 2, while it ends this year, last year of dollars collected will be next year. The idea is what the city's doing currently is they have a joint review board, and I confirmed I had possibly up there, but they have a joint review board set for August 7th. And what the joint review board is, and that meeting will happen before your next meeting here, what that is if there's any, basically the taxing bodies have representatives on that board, each taxing body has a representative, and they review the eligibility plan, and they determine whether the city's met the legal requirements to proceed with the TIP. It's not whether you like it or don't like it, it's really, do you think they've met the legal requirements to create a TIP, or the eligibility standards been met. In the TIP, just since I have the map up, it's kind of out of order, but I wanted to point it out here. There's 2 projects in the TIP that we know of that are currently under construction that are incentivized with dollars from TIP 1. It's the Cornerstone Dekalb and the Plaza Dekalb project. Those projects are currently incentivized. They'll be in the new TIP. That's why they're kind of in the red dots there on the bottom left. Is you'll see just a new TIP kind of outline there.
Is Plaza Dekalb the one on 2nd and Lincoln?
Yes, yes, 200 East Lincoln. And as I understand, and speaking with Jason, Both of those are underway. The development agreement's in place. They've paid out half of the incentive already out of the current funds. And what will happen is, just to jump ahead a little bit, what will happen is if they put it into the new TIP, those dollars are going to capture the increased DAV out of those new projects, even though they're already incentivized. And those projects will kick off TIP increment for the next 23 years. And I'll explain the rationale as to why the city would like to do that. And I'll identify and spell out kind of some of the things you'll need to consider as we move forward with regard to that. If we go to the next slide, please. So just to kind of give you a lay of the land here, out of the 281 parcels in the new proposed TIP, 99% of them, I'm estimating about 278 are from TIP 1. That's about 100, and when they create the new TIP, what will happen is, if you remember when the TIP was created, there's a base EAV, and then as time goes on, the EAV goes up, and the value in taxes collected between the increased values what goes into the TIP. TIP 1 was set to expire in the end of 2021. But when they take these parcels out of TIP 1 to put them into new TIP, it'll reset the base. So what that means is you'll immediately pick up about $5.1 million in EAV. That translates to your tax rate roughly $400,000 in taxes. You're getting approximately half, and I'll explain why I say approximately, currently through the IGA. There's an IGA back in 2007 that you entered into with the city, that when you supported their extension, they've been distributing about half of the increment created out of those TIPs to the taxing bodies.
Intergovernmental agreement.
Yes, intergovernmental agreement, yes. So in essence then, what happens is by bringing these properties out of the TIP currently early, 3 years early, there's approximately 400,000 a year, about or 400,000, excuse me, a year, yes. For 3 years, about $1 million to half of it, a little less than half you would have received normally through the IGA, whether they did this or not. So there is a little bit of an uptick there from a positive. The downside to that is the parcels that are going in here would have now been in a TIP for 55 years, even if it resets, because they were in for 35 years. Now they're going to be in for another 23 years going forward. So these parcels, in essence, for over half a century have been in a TIP one way or the other. The map to the bottom right is just one of the maps the school district, not the school district, the city utilized to justify creation of the TIP. And it's kind of small, but what it says in essence is the properties in the proposed TIP have dragged behind the other parcels in the city with regard to values. So while property values in 2012 maybe decreased 9.7% in the city as a whole, without counting this property, these properties went down 10.1%, for example. And they show how they dragged behind a point or 2 points every year for the past 5 years. And it looks like this last year was the biggest change, the 2016 to 2017, fiscal 2017, where the rest of the city grew by 5.3%. These parcels went down by 0.5%. I haven't dug into or asked Jason why he thinks that might have happened. It could have been possibly because those 2 projects were torn down, for all I know. I just don't know that yet. Next slide, please. Typical goals for TIFs. So on the considerations in the early page, I had 4 things identified that I wanted to kind of walk through for considerations. Uses, what are they going to use the money for? Types of uses they'll utilize for. Surplus, what happens to the surplus that's there now, how much is there, and what's going to happen to it. Hoarding, which means they're going to take dollars from one TIP and transfer it to a new TIP, to the new TIP potentially that are in the existing TIP. And then we'll talk a little bit more about those specific projects I just laid out, Plaza and the Dekalb project. So the first thing is uses. You usually create a TIP, you want to stabilize or increase property values, you want to try to eliminate blight condition, stimulate growth in retail spending, and leverage it with private investment. You don't just want to use dollars, public dollars, for projects that aren't going to accomplish those goals. Because the whole idea is to get rid of, to decrease blight, to increase EAV, and strengthen the tax base. The city of Dekalb recognized in a series of letters, internal letters, as they were leading up to this process in the last couple of years, that some of the dollars historically out of the TIP were used for general road maintenance, infrastructure stuff that might not have returned the highest return on investment. That's been historical. And lately, they've said they've utilized it more for projects like this Cornerstone project and the Plaza project. So one of the questions before us in some of our discussions has been, how hard should we ask that we look for some type of assurance that go forward, they'll continue to use it to align with those goals versus typical maintenance type of stuff that might really be helping out their general fund instead of using general fund dollars for those types of road maintenance items. We go to the next slide, please. So in order, if that is a goal for the school district to say, hey, I want to get some assurance, there's really 3 different things you could do. You could ask for an intergovernmental agreement with the city regarding use of future funds, the types of project funds and parameters where they use that money. The city may say, well, that's too restrictive because we don't really have a crystal ball to foresee what might come forward. For example, they may say they may need to improve or replace existing failing infrastructure with storm sewers, which is identified in the eligibility report, for a new project. And if we tie their hands with that IGA, we might end up losing a project. So I can understand that. So the first one is kind of one end of the spectrum, which is we put in the IGA and they'd have to come in intergovernmental agreement with taxing bodies, and they'd have to come out and try to get that amended. That might be too restrictive. The next step is a soft commitment. They pass a resolution, but that may not be enforceable because they could change that down the road with future boards. But you may feel comfortable with just a simple resolution and kind of hold them to their word. The third option is they create a kind of a TIF advisory committee where taxing bodies have a seat on an advisory committee. Maybe it's coupled with an intergovernmental agreement so that if an advisory committee has presented a project that they want to use TIF funds for, if the advisory committee votes it down, it doesn't mean the city can't still do the project, but possibly they need a supermajority vote, 2/3 vote of the council in order to pass it. That kind of promotes a little bit of transparency. The downside that the city might say to that is, well, if it's kind of an issue that garners some public heat, some public objection, then we may get some council members, if they get a lot of public objection, that they get weak in the knees and they may not vote to approve it, and maybe it was a good project. That'd be something that they may identify as a concern. From our standpoint, that might be a good transparency issue that kind of brings the project out to the light so we know where the dollars are being used and how they're being used in advance as opposed to trying to piece it together afterwards. Next slide, please. So that's kind of the use question, and where you want to go. The prior slide is the use question. Is that a concern and how those dollars are used? We want to focus them towards those goals. The next item is the surplus. TIF 1, as I indicated earlier, has been distributing 50% of its increment as surplus. Now, here's where it gets kind of tricky, and I apologize if this gets a little bit too detailed, but yes.
Would you rather we wait?
No, please stop. Well, let's stop me, because if I wait, I'm afraid that I might lose track of what you need.
So if we go back to the use.
Yes.
Why do we care as a school district?
You may not care. The only reason you may care is as you get into surplus, if there's more surplus, there's more dollars for taxing bodies, right? If there's more dollars, the goals of the TIF get accomplished, and there's more dollars being distributed to the school district, the taxing bodies. So the reason you care is if the dollars aren't being utilized for growing the AV, firming up jobs and private investment, right? People taking an old building, maybe knocking it down, rebuilding a new one, then they're just using the dollars for repaving streets, putting new sidewalks in. Is that really accomplishing the goal that you want to see? Because if they use their general money for that, right, their general fund money for that, then theoretically there should be more money out of that surplus for the taxing bodies to be distributed.
Well, we don't have input, do we? I mean,
Well,
we
you
don't really
don't-
have input
you don't-
as to saying you can't do streets because we're not going to get anything out of it.
No, and let me back up. You don't have input, except that you do have input because, as I understand it, maybe I don't have the correct political lay of the land, but I understand that they believe they have support to move forward. So if you were to oppose it politically, right, politically, you talk to some aldermen, then
Oppose what?
oppose the TIF creation, excuse me, the TIF creation. I think the city would like to see support from the school district, see support and collaboration with the new TIF. And therefore, if they're looking for support, remember I had 3 options: you can oppose it, you can stay neutral, or you can support it. So if they want your support, and you want to support it, you could then ask for certain types of uses with regard to, where they use the money. Maybe you don't care, maybe where they use the money is not as important, because remember I said there's 4 items: use, surplus, portability, and specific projects. What I'm thinking is you may get to and say, hey, the most thing I'm concerned about is the surplus. Let them have free reign of the use, let them have free reign of portability, and let them have free reign of the specific projects. But let's consider the surplus as kind of the thing out there. So I wanted to kind of walk through each of the 4. But that's a very good question.
Okay.
But the more surplus, the better we come out.
Yeah, if they distribute the surplus, it's from you guys, yes.
I think there's a deeper level to this, Rick, at least for me there is, and that's the expansion of the economy overall. The whole concept to me of a tip is to multiply the dollars. You want to get private money in. And we need to expand our EAV base so that ultimately the district has a wider base and a lower tax rate. That's the big picture view. Now, you can talk about surplus, but that's only a piece of the puzzle, right? We really need to expand the base in the whole economy. And if we can't get more private dollars in because we're using, for instance, using the money, if you go to do infrastructure like sewers and so on, then that might, depends on the project and so on and how exactly they use it. That's why you need a joint review board, but.
Okay,
That's a very good point.
thank you.
So on the surplus though, so as we're talking about surplus, I think this is an area that doesn't hurt the city's creation of the TIF. I think there's upside potential for the taxing bodies. And what's happened is this TIF was created so long ago that it used to collect sales tax. So the TIF used to have a sales tax component. So it used to collect property tax and sales tax. So what happened is when you guys entered into the school board entered into the intergovernmental agreement back in 07, nobody fast forwarded the act to look at the specific language of how you distribute the surplus. So what's happened is in 2013, you stopped fiscal year 2013, the last year, the sales tax money went into the TIF. Okay. So tax year 14, 15, 16, and now 17. The money that's gone in has only been from property tax revenue collected from taxing districts. No sales tax from the city or the state. However, the statute's written, in my view, a pretty ambiguous way. And it says you reimburse people based on what they put in. It doesn't say what they put in this year, like a last in, first out type of method, LIFO manufacturing. It just says what they've been put in. So the interpretation from other people in the TIF industry, my colleagues, other people, and I think I'm trying to vet it down with the Department of Revenue, is that, no, you've got to reimburse based on the life of the TIF. So let's assume that's accurate, the way they've been doing it. Let's assume we don't have any possibility to change it. And we're still going to follow the Department of Revenue, but I don't think there's a high likelihood of that. What's been happening as a result is the dollars have been going into the taxing body, but 24% of it's been distributed to, when the surplus comes out, you distribute half for surplus. Half of the surplus that's been coming out, for example, here's some numbers. If 3 million's gone in, let's fast forward 2 slides, please. This is kind of right here. So this comes from the TIF report. So fiscal year 14, 15, 16, what's happened is when we distribute the dollars, this illustrates the variance between what would have happened if we didn't have to distribute surplus, state surplus, back to the state and the city versus if we do. So what's happened is we're distributing dollars back to the state of Illinois and back to the city because they were putting sales tax into the TIF back when it was collecting it, even though they're no longer putting it. So again, fiscal year 14, 15, 16, there was no sales tax collected, but yet $2 million were allocated back to the city and the state and out of taxes. So property taxes went in, surplus distribution went out, and a portion of that got allocated to those entities that once were allocated sales tax in. Yes.
That would have otherwise gone to us prior to 13. Is that what you're saying? Is that 2 million that would have otherwise been ours out of the tax, the sales tax, et cetera?
So prior to 13, under the terms of the intergovernmental agreement you guys were distributing, there were dollars going in for sales tax.
Right.
So even though they had dollars coming out, it wasn't dollar for dollar, but there was a smaller margin of error, much smaller margin of error. So now what's happening is I think it's kind of an unjust enrichment. The city and the state are benefiting from the surplus distribution based on the language of the act. How do you fix that? There's two options, right? Solutions. I hate people who always point out problems with no solutions. So you've got one solution is you try to convince the state. I don't think that's likely going to happen because they need money like everybody else, and good luck getting that done. The other option, I think, is we have to work within the confines of the law and work with our intergovernmental agreement, and hopefully our partner, the city, if they, as we support them, if that's what you want to do, support them on the new tip, to say, what can we do? And some of the options on this, I'm going to find my slide now, because I have a slide on this.
So rewrite the language of the new tip?
No, rewrite the language of the IGA. If you go to the next slide. So if you think about it, there's dollars being, here's an example this year. The city passed a resolution, and they're going to fund dollars into tip 1 from tip 2. They have enough dollars in tip 2. Tip 2 never had a sales tax, so there's never that distribution back to the state and city. So they need dollars in tip 1. They're going to fund from tip 2 to tip 1, then use it to pay their annual obligations, which include paying dollars to all the taxing dollar districts, probably about $3 million. Well, why would you bundle $3 million from tip 2 to tip 1, bundle it out of tip 1, at which point you wash about 24-25% out of it? Why don't we amend our IGAs and pay it right out of tip 2? And we don't, and nobody gets decreased. The only people in effort that would get decreased there would be the state, and then the city would lose probably about $240,000 for that year.
And our IGA would disallow them moving it from tip 1 to tip 2, tip 2 to tip 1.
Well, we'll need a new agreement. We can create a new intergovernmental agreement.
Right.
It'll just have to be by agreement. I can't envision any taxing body in the county that would object to that, given that they're going to make more dollars.
Right.
Except for the.
Well, I think we just have to, there's got to be a middle ground where we can work something out.
So what would be their incentive?
Well, their incentive would be, if you go back to that slide, one slide, please. Their incentive would be either, hey, we want cooperation for some of the other things, use, portability, and we want your support because it comes out as a great collaborative effort if we're supporting them. But if you feel we need something else to give you, you've got out of the annually, it looks like, if you look at fiscal year 16, you've got about 372 going to the state and 264 to the city. Maybe you just work on getting the city an extra 264 and not the state. So instead of having distributable dollars, you say to them, hey, we know you need road maintenance, right? Which is what they used to do years ago. And why don't you take some dollars out of that tip and use it for your road maintenance? It's perfectly legal. You can do it. It's an eligible tip cost. So why don't you take those out? Let's not distribute surplus. Let's amend our IGAs, and it'll be a win-win net for all of us.
So make a compromise with them about some of it going to their maintenance, and then some of it, and then some of it going to us.
Correct. There's a lot of different possibilities to make compromises.
And otherwise, our negotiating position could be going from support to opposition. Right?
Correct.
I mean, that's really pretty much.
I think that from what I've heard, I don't know if this is accurate, but from what I've heard, some of the aldermen are kind of teetering on this anyway, on this new tip.
Right.
I don't know if that's changed. I don't know if that's still there, but obviously, if the school doesn't, as opposed to it, I think that might influence them. The school's for it, that might influence them for it.
And we come out with a couple $100,000 ahead.
Yeah, well, we'll fast forward. I think it's more than that, actually.
Good.
Because I think in my mind is this tip goes on until, I said, 2021, right? So you had 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. You've got 5 more years of taxes that I don't show here. So if you multiply your line out by 5 years, $2 million. Just there. And even if you have to give up roughly 40% of that because you're accommodating the city, allowing them to take dollars out for general maintenance, if you take off 40% of $2 million, you're still ahead $800,000 million too, right? So, and then I think there's some other, as we're talking about surplus, I think it's the next slide. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next one. I'm going to skip around a little. As we're talking about surplus, since we're on this discussion, these are Jason's sheets, and I apologize, but the reds are the projected tip balance, low projection, high projection from the 2 tips. Tip 1 and tip 2. So you have tip balance 1, tip balance 2 on the low, tip balance 1, tip balance 2 on the high projection. So I don't know the variables that went into these projections. I'm just taking them for face value. Okay. So And this is after paying out obligations, bonds, obligations for, I believe, the Cornerstone project and the other TIF. We're projecting somewhere between $1.6 million to $3.6 million on TIF 1, $10 million to $10.3 million on TIF 2, kind of balances. So in total, you're talking $11.7 to $14 million. So the question comes in my mind when you get to porting, use, surplus, now porting, is for what projects are we going to use that money? For what projects do they want to take it out of surplus? Because at the end of the TIF, if it's surplus, you're supposed to distribute to the taxing bodies. And then there's a little nuance there for TIF 1 I'll get in shortly, where you're supposed to distribute to the taxing bodies pro rata based on how their proportionate share is in the most recent tax bill. So for TIF 2, it's easy because there's no state surplus. If that was surplus and the TIF ended and they collect it next year and they don't have any other obligations, let's say they were distributing about $10 million, you get your share of that. So whatever that is, 65% of that would be your share they pay out of surplus. But if now they want to port that over to some specific projects in the new TIF, and we can argue about can they do that, can't they do that later, but let's just talk about concept. If they do that, then it's not your surplus, so you won't be getting those dollars. And hopefully if they bring them to the new TIF, that's where it becomes easy and important to say, well, what are you incentivizing? Because to your point, Carrie, if you're getting private investment and you're growing the tax base, that's a good thing, right? Maybe you guys want to be supportive of that. So again, it comes down to transparency and what's going to be used, what are the dollars used for, and are we okay with that or not? Because we're talking a lot of money. We're not talking $50,000 or $100,000 here. And it's been, 23 years. TIF 2's ending in 23 years, and TIF 1's on year, 34, 32, whatever it is. It's ending in 2021. I think there might be some risk in TIF 1, and this is where I'd like to collaborate a little bit with the city attorney on, because much like there's a formula for distributing a percentage of it back to the state and the city annually, if there's a surplus, there's a formula for at the end of the life, how do you figure that out? And the formula that I've been provided from somebody who writes on these things that I know, one of my colleagues, and the Department of Revenue's handed out, I think there might be an error in it. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at it, but what it does is it says you look in proportion. This is a sheet that I was given. You look in proportion the city and the county, the city and the state, and 100% of that surplus at the end of life might go to them before any of the other taxing bodies. I have to question that. I have to look at that a little more closely to see if that could possibly be true. But if there is a possibility that's true, that at the end of the life of TIF 1, that between $1 and $3 million, none of it would come to us anyway, then that's more the reason why we should work together to say, hey, if you need dollars for specific projects in that new TIF that we're creating, let's pull them out of TIF 1 and not TIF 2. Let's drain TIF 1 now, whether it's your general maintenance, whether it's specific projects, whatever it is. And let's leave TIF 2 to the most part there to distribute to us out of there instead. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit of shifting where the dollars come. All of it's perfectly legal, it's working within the rules of the statute. There's nothing untoward about it.
And it sounds like it increases our negotiating position.
I think it does. I mean, if you have leverage with regard to your support, I think yes. Then this should be something that doesn't cost the city anything.
Right.
Or if it costs them a little bit, but it makes us. It helps all the other taxing districts, county, city, or the county, the school district, the township, everybody, the library. We should all be pretty much in unison on this one. I think I skipped a couple slides. I'm going to run back real quick if you don't mind. If you can go back right here, thank you. So this is, to your point, Carrie. Down at the bottom here, you'll notice Cornerstone Dekalb and Plaza Dekalb project. So those we have on Cornerstone. It's a $10 million project, $7 million in private investment, $3 million of TIF funds. They already paid out half of that. Part of the dollars they want to funnel from TIF 1 to the new TIF is the second phase of that Cornerstone projects and the second phase of the Plaza Dekalb. So you'll notice both of them had significant private investment and they had TIF investment also. Now, part of the negotiations, just to be aware of the way this will work is, if you think about it, those projects are incentivized using money that's already here today, right? We've all been in the TIF for 23 or 35 years, TIF 1, been incentivized using those dollars. When it's in the new TIF, those properties will spin off TIF every year. And if they weren't in the TIF because they're already incentivized, they'd be taxing district dollars, right? But when they're in the new TIF, they're gonna spend off dollars that the taxing districts won't have. The EAB won't be your EAB. So on one hand, you look at it and say, how can that be fair? We've already incentivized it. Shouldn't those dollars be available for us? From the city standpoint, the way they're looking at it is, hey, that's going to be the golden goose that continues to spin off dollars for us in the TIF that then we can recycle and use in the new projects. So when you say, why do we care about the use? That's one of the reasons. If you're not going to object to that use, right? To saying, hey, listen, we'd like to have an intergovernmental agreement that maybe spins off that increment for us since we've already incentivized it. And you say, we see the greater good of the bigger picture, incentivize new investment, new private investment. And as long as you're using it for those types of uses, we're okay with this, assuming we get an agreement with the surplus. Then for them, that's a huge thing, because if that spits out over the life of the TIF, you know, I think when I read the development agreements, they're each like 100 pages that I got a couple days ago. It's worded that if in 30 years they don't recover the TIF money given to them, the developer would have to pay it back to the city. So I would envision that those dollars will be recouped over the life of the TIF, probably 23 years. So you could be looking at $4.9 million over the life of 23 years out of those two projects. So I think it's worth one of the negotiation standpoints. So when I go back to when I was in law school, I used to always use acronyms to remember stuff. United States Parking Service. We want to deliver an agreement, right? You need use, you need surplus, you need P is porting, and S is specific projects, USPS. That's what we need to talk about here. So going back to the last slide now, just fast forward. One more right here. So I guess the question really on the table is we're looking for direction. You know, when we meet with the city, and you know, we'll meet with staff, we'll probably start meeting with some aldermen directly is what I'm thinking, because they're the guys that vote on it. We already met with the mayor once. Then are we gonna look to support, oppose, or remain neutral? And if we're gonna support, are those 4 points I went over all kind of up for negotiation so that we're willing to kind of give up on some use issues as long as we understand we've got the surplus then kind of figured out, we understand where they're using the dollars for new specific projects. It's just not taking dollars, putting it into the new TIF and then using it for general road maintenance. If we were to oppose it, we look at political and legal challenges. I don't want to get into that now, because if we do oppose it, we can probably go into closed session and talk about that a little more in detail. Or do we want to remain neutral? Those are kind of on the table for discussion now, and I open the table up for any more questions.
I'm glad that you wanted to take for some general questions. A TIF requires a reliance on growth. And some places grow and some places don't. And the idea that the schools are going to be giving up a share of their taxable income, of the money that comes from taxes, into the city seems to be something that would count on us looking at, has this city of DeKalb grown? Its population has. And it has some nice area out on Sycamore Road that wasn't there 25 years ago. But if I look back to 35 years ago and say what was going on economically in terms of the way people lived and how they felt about DeKalb, I would not necessarily go for the idea that we are doing a lot better after 35 years of having TIF 1 sitting around. And property values have not been high. I don't necessarily think that we can rely on the city of DeKalb giving its the wisdom of its leadership over the past 35 years to be there for us, to be able to take advantage of. And as a result, I look at this and say, let's oppose it.
I want to jump in there a little bit. Howard, I feel the same way that you, because there's issues. I've been to a few of those downtown association and places where they targeted on the TIF. And I felt a lot of the same sort of feeling that you do. I don't think it's there to, TIFs aren't made to necessarily, I mean, they are to a certain extent made to fund or seed growth, basically is what they are. They're made to seed growth. But one of the things that we've been doing in DeKalb, as opposed to other towns that have felt the same kind of pressures, is they've really put a lot of eggs into the concept of not letting downtown go, the core area of DeKalb go completely down the toilet. And one of the things that they've been doing, and I think with mixed results, lately I think that they've changed their way of going about it, but with mixed results, they've been pushing to keep a core center of the town, whereas at one point or another, they kind of let it slide away and go out on Sycamore Road. They realized that that's, abandoning downtown was not a good idea. They've changed their ideas. So I think that they've kind of been fumbling their way down the road to a certain extent. At this point, the question is, have they made some good decisions, and are we going to be party to the new decisions to it, or how we're going to feel about those new decisions?
No, very, very good, because I agree, TIF isn't always about new growth and bringing in large, but it's also about maintaining current EV, even if it's not growing it, but keeping it from sliding faster and further down, and bringing in just really poor blight. So I see cities, downtown areas say, hey, we'll give you some TIF dollars and maybe match you on some facade grants or match you on some reinvestments to just normal businesses that don't have huge upgrades, but just to make it nicer so it doesn't continue to fall. Yes.
We were there.
And those are all good uses. And I've also seen people use it for, I know you guys have used a lot of it for the Egyptian theater, a little placemate center of town so it doesn't continue to fall down. Those are all good uses of TIF also. But again, it's all based on where the board wants to see them spend the dollars and if you think they've been using it wisely. And I think from what I've seen in this short, from what I've seen, there have been some pretty honest letters there from Jason to the council about past use, how past use was problematic and how should we focus on new return on investment. I think that's refreshing to see, quite frankly.
I think we should pique our interest in the surplus, as part of that, getting some of that surplus back. So, use that as leverage, to be a part of I think maybe, the advisory committee is, in combination with trying to get surplus back. It's a nice way to be involved. I mean, first of all, you have to understand what you're talking about. But for me, I think it's a good approach.
Okay.
Cindy, do you have thoughts on this?
When we had talked with the city before and the city staff, just in terms of the porting of the existing fund or the surplus to the new TIF, the comfort level would be how are those funds going to get used? We had talked about that before. And how do we, what comfort level do we have that you have shovel-ready product or projects that are ready to go that these funds are that can be utilized right away to see that economic growth. And if those funds don't get utilized in a certain period of time, will they be able to go back to the taxing bodies? So, and I know it's more of a gentleman's agreement to some extent, because yeah, you can do a resolution, but does it really have teeth legally? That would be a tough thing to do, because then that kind of handcuffs it as well. So we want to be sensitive to that, so they have the ability to do those things, but also to know that, yeah, if these funds aren't being utilized appropriately, can they go back to the taxing bodies? And I think we had some agreement on that at our last meeting. It's just a matter of how we would do that.
So the intergovernmental agreement is kind of where you're.
Yeah, would it be an IGA that we would do with something like that?
And we could do an IGA. I don't know if the city would feel it'd be too restrictive. And that's why I thought that committee was kind of the middle of the way, middle of the road. But the only downside to the committee is that you have a meeting, it's public, someone can go to it, they can learn about the project ahead of time. And then by the time it gets to council, people can start, the public can start working the voting members. But I think that's all good. I think that's what transparency is all for. So I don't see that as being a downside. I see that as being a positive. And if there's a good project and there's always some naysayers against it, you need to have enough of a coalition on the other side to support it. It just needs a little more work.
I must say, I've been dubious of a lot of what the city and the Downtown Association have been thinking and what they've done in the past. I think that the portion of private to TIF on these last two projects, pretty good.
Yeah,
it's a pretty substantial commitment by the got the person in back of it to making that work. So haven't seen that in the past from the things that they've done downtown.
Let's see, if you had a committee, for example, they'd review that, they'd look at that to make sure, yeah, it is what it seems, it is a big investment. You know, I've seen projects like that in the past where the private investment, there are a lot of internal developer fees that are probably higher than normal that are funneled back in and say, hey, they're $7 million. So that's where your committee looks at it and says, yeah, these are really $7 million and those are reasonable fees and costs and it's looking good. But yeah, I agree with you on its face, it looks
On the face, but can't say for sure.
So it's important to be a collaboration, really.
I believe so. I believe TIP are good. If you use them correctly, it's like a vehicle, right? If you use the car correctly, it's good. If you're going out after a night drinking, it's not a good idea. So I think TIP are generally good. You just need to make sure you've got a good partnership with the city and working in an agreement. And I think we've got some opportunity here to really flesh out, is there good faith here to work together with the surplus? I think the surplus really, in my mind, is the weather vane. To say, are we working together or not, guys? If you're going to tell us you want to pass the TIP and we'll talk later about the surplus, well, that's not really working together.
But I just want to be one last comment from me. From the presentation that you've given us so far and the way that you presented yourself, I feel that you as an advocate, you talking to, as our agent, talking to the alderman and talking to the mayor and talking to the city attorney, I think that you, what I'm getting from you, you have our best interest in mind here. And I think that I trust you to do that along with Cindy. I think I trust you to take care of that and then bring it back to us as you see fit. And that would be my view.
The thing that worries me is what you said, you know, about the percentage of increase over time with the existing TIF and how, you know, I would think it's a TIF that ought to have been better than the rest of the city. But in fact, according to the data you just gave us at the beginning, there was less of a.
That's not mine. That's out of the city's own eligibility report. Their own report says this part of TIF 1, because remember, TIF 1's huge.
Yeah.
By the way, I forgot to mention. So when TIF 1 ends, so the EAV, remember how I said $5 million will become available? When TIF 1 ends, we look today, there's, in addition to that $55,100,000, there's another $51 million of incremental EAV that comes offline in 2021. So that $51 million would be about $4 million in taxable revenues, you know, for the school district. Now, keep in mind, not all that's new, because you're currently getting about half a year anyway, or a little less than half a year, because the state surplus distribution, about 40-some% of it. But in essence, it'll be a lot more revenue coming on board when that TIP expires in 2021. And that's why it's possible their surplus report. So I'm sorry, your question was?
Yeah, just thinking about the change in percentage, the TIF, the downtown section of TIF versus the rest of the town.
If I was on the city's perspective, I'd say, hey, had we not added TIF, it would have fallen even further.
Yeah, that'd be one point.
And therefore, the TIF's really saved us because it's kept it at close to par, even though it's under.
But over time, they've decided what they're going to do with their TIF. When they did TIF 1, they were really doing lots of different things, and they got kind of goofy.
I think it helped a lot of retail up there too.
It did.
Funded a lot of dollars early on in the TIF or something.
And that reminds me of something I had to say earlier, the synergism of, you know, someone comes in, does an apartment building, I feel like they just did Cornerstone, right? Yeah. And there's, I think, 53 units, and they're all buildings, got 160 some odd applicants waiting, you know, they'd love to get in there if they could. Where are those people coming from? And what does that mean to the rest of the rental units? And how wealthy are they? And are they going to spend more money than the rest of the town?
And you know, will they stay there more than 6 weeks?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so I mean, that's the thing that kind of worries me about.
They're going to borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, well, that's what you don't want to do, right? But
I know.
But the synergism aspect is the unpredictable part. You know, and I'm wondering.
That's not really up for us.
Well, yeah, but if you have a collaboration in some part, different people that are on some sort of a review board or advisory agency or whatever it turns out to be, you know, they're all going to have input, just like our FFAC, you know, gives the board input on, you know, business office and economics and so on and so forth. You know, and we take or leave the advice of that entity. You know, so again, I think it has to be a collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you can, I have these discussions all the time as we're incentivizing different projects for different clients, because I represent municipalities too. It's like, okay, if we can incentivize, I think there are 51 units at the one of the places, 51 one-bedrooms. So, the Cornerstone. So, if those weren't online, people would keep living where they are. Does that mean the landlord's reinvesting or not? If I have a nicer product now, then maybe, unless we're growing the city, maybe they are vacating some of those units, but it'll force the landlord hopefully to put more dollars into it, or pull people out of some of the housing that they want to return back to single family. There's houses on John Street that are in essence student housing that are multifamily that maybe they'd like to one of the things they mentioned is we'd like to try to repurpose those back to single family. So you pull student housing out of there and you put them into the apartments, which is more of kind of an urban setting. They can get out and walk around downtown. We're never going to guess that crystal ball. It's going to be trial and error, really, and say, let's try this, see how it works. Let's try this, see how it works. And you'll be successful sometimes, and you won't others.
But doing nothing is not always good. It has to be a collaboration because it's an iterative process. You don't get it all on the first go around.
That's right.
This is the interim project. This is the interim part of the process. We're 30 years in, and we're still fumbling around trying to figure out how to make it work.
So is the consensus, or it seems that what I'm hearing is we're interested in talking about the increment, which that 11 to 14 million increment, and potentially then not an IGA so much, but potential advisory committee.
Because there's a lot further.
Negotiating for that extra money.
And then the surplus.
I would say negotiating for that extra money, that money that has been kind of sitting on, leaving on the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you catch that?
I did. So what's going to happen between now and August 7th is they're going to have a joint review board meeting. And again, the joint review board meeting is meant to either object or not, whether or not they've met the eligibility criteria for creation of the debt. Those are usually loser arguments to argue that they haven't met it. It's so easy to meet those criteria. They have a third-party independent expert. So what I'd like to focus on between now and then is seeing if we can get together with the city, Jamie and Cindy and I, and seeing if we can talk about these issues, surplus, surplus distribution, and some type of advisory committee.
And would there be a board representative to that advisory committee, or would we have a representative staff?
Up to you guys who that would be, sure.
That would probably come as that committee was hypothetically developed.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other answers?
We have, what are we?
And then,
what are we-
if there are, to do a consensus to move forward with those recommendations for.
Yeah, I support that.
Okay.
I do.
I do.
I don't.
So, staff, I think with Howard. And Gary, so the four of us that are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have the IDEA grant, 2018, 2019, and this is an informational item.
Thanks, guys.
Good evening. I'd like to talk to you about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant. Oh.
I know. About ready for this. Yes, ma'am.
Would like you lock your room?
It's like meat cooler,
I don't want
whatever.
to
it's
over there.
Don't worry. Oh, are we cold?
Let's say Jenny's.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
So the IDEA grant supports our students with individual education plans, or IEP. Okay, those are numbers from the last 5 years. Yes, it is an increase in our numbers of students with individual education plans in our district. That then means an increase in IDEA funds to our district as well. If you go to the next slide, please, Emily. Thank you. So the IDEA grant is a federal grant, but it is managed through the state. And that's why it's called a flow through. It flows through the state. The state, essentially, I have to write the grant and to the state, and the state takes a look at it and it ensures that we are following the mandate of the grant. And as I said, it is based on child count. So we have two parts of the IDEA grant. One piece is the preschool preschool grant, Part B preschool grant, and the other part is the Part B flow-through grant. Again, it flows through. And those are our allocations for this year. Thank you, Hunter. You can move forward. Thanks. So I want to just tell you how those funds will be spent this year. First off, for the preschool grant, very simply, all $18,354 will be spent to pay for our Northwestern Illinois Association fee, which is NIA. NIA provides to our district our occupational therapy, physical therapy, vision and hearing, and itinerant services, audiology services. It's also pays for and provides our deaf and hard of hearing teachers, interpreters, and some professional development as well as consultation. In particular, we use their consultation for autism. Okay.
Can I go back to the little slide previous?
Sure.
So this is the IDEA, I'm looking at the bottom one, flow through grant. I think $1,268,649, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it is based on per head?
Child count. It is
And do you have
child count of students, and that was the first slide. If you go back, that's based on the number of students we have with individual education plans or IEPs.
And is it variable depending on the need, or is it the same? Just one head, X amount of dollars?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
And
a
are we
formula.
looking at that for am I seeing that 1,064 children, 2018?
Yes.
And that amount of money is per the amount of X number of dollars per head to give us
It is based on
that
child count.
1,200,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the preschool grant is, like I said, goes all to the NIA bill. Okay, those are those services. If you move forward, then the IDEA flow-through Part B grant, that $1.2 million, this is how that is going to be broken down for this coming year. You might go, well, how do you know what to spend the money on? Well, soon you'll be hearing about our district improvement plan. And within that plan, there are different components, 4 different components. I used the district improvement plan to decide, not just myself, I should say, student services in collaboration with curriculum and instruction, use that district improvement plan to decide how we should spend our funding, okay? Each year, we take a look at that and go, okay, we're going to need some additional funds. For example, this year, we're putting additional funds into specialized curriculum. Because of ESSA, we need to beef up our curriculum, specialized curriculum for students in the area of literacy. So we will be moving forward on something called Systems 44, which is a tier 3 level intervention for students or alternative curriculum for students with specialized needs in that area of literacy. And it also couples with Read 180. So it's a nice pairing. So that's where some of that money is going to. You see the specialized curriculum. That will support those ESSA goals that we've written. Then the 21,000, part of IDEA says you may use at at most 15% of the funds toward a response to intervention, a general ed type of support. And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, because then we started Read 180 3 years ago. 4 years ago, the Director of Student Services came to you and said, we'd like to purchase Read 180 as a response to intervention. And the school board at that time agreed, and it was paid for through IDEA grant as part of this general ed funding. And they allow up to 15%.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you feel about Read 180 since it's so scripted, and that's one of the things that a lot of people in the district complain about? So, I mean, this is something.
Read 180 is,
yes.
Based on it's not my opinion, it's the data. The data is showing it as being an effective intervention. Absolutely effective. We just received the data from that, and students are growing, and students who were very resistant to gaining and making gains in their literacy are making gains.
This is our own data, generated on our own students.
Yes, sir. Okay. So you'll see there that 37,000 is going to be spent towards Read 180, and that again is to continue that program. Every year I put more money, around $5,000 to $6,000 into technology, and that's really basically to continue to replenish old laptops and Chromebooks that are used for student services in particular. Okay. 7,500 health services, supplies, and equipment. Our occupational therapy requires quite a bit of equipment for sensory needs, and that money goes towards that. This is another area, PDIS meetings, that we have increased. Based on, you'll hear again in our district improvement plan, one of our goals, of course, is all based on social and emotional skills and development of social emotional skills. Part of that is our PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Systems. And we have increased the funding there so that our teams can work on Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 being what all students get. Tier 2 is they get Tier 1 and some more. Tier 3 is most intensive. So we're going to be building up our supports in each of those levels. Professional development, again, to support that social emotional plan, I've had to increase in the professional development. We have, for example, we have 2 presenters, trainers coming in to train on a trauma-informed social emotional Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention for all of our social workers and psychologists to use. Again, to respond to our social emotional plan.
Will this be like during collaboration? Is that what you're going to do, or individual?
No,
that's just PD, professional
the
PD.
PD is coming in prior to the school year with students, and then that intervention will be part of small group or individual interventions because it's Tier 2 and Tier 3, called CVITs and bounce back. Then we have transitional services that those are wonderful services that the Center for Independent Living comes out and they provide to our high school students who have independent living skills, and they're in that transition age from 14 and a half to 22. Then we have, yes, sir.
Clarify that, would you please? What do you do for that? I mean, what does that? I mean, I
What
know
is
it's
the
not much
14,000?
money, but what does RAMP do?
So they come in and they have they present lessons to high school students within
Cooking,
no, not
living skills.
more about preparing a resume, interview techniques, setting up scenarios, how to live on your own. Yes, all the pieces, but they have set lessons and they come in and present to our students. No, it's worth the funds. 107,000 you see there is it supports our office staff in the student services, not their whole salaries. One of them is whole salary. But if you recall, I did come to you last spring regarding we were increasing from a level 2 to the level 3. That was taken care of in this grant. My service tracker, that is our data service and our management system that we use for IEPs, and that's per student, so per student in the district. So that goes up a little bit each year. Proportionate share, what that means is those are dollars that we take care of students who are not within our school system but are in St. Mary's or homeschool students, and that is our responsibility to, if they need an individual service plan, that D428 takes care of them as well. And then as you see there, 75% of this grant goes toward paying for the NIA services. Okay, thank you.
Christy, can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Proportionate share of those homeschoolers in St. Mary's and so on, $2,500 doesn't seem to go very far.
No, it doesn't. That's given, thank you for bringing that up. That's actually the amount that the state says we need to pay. We need to set aside.
How do you determine that?
How is that determined by per capita or per student? I mean,
It is determined on your use each year. Mm-hmm. So it depends on how many students we've served in the past.
I see. Okay. Thanks.
And our numbers are very low.
Yeah, it must be.
Okay, so I'm looking at this NIA contract, 967.
Yes.
The $967,000. And then in parentheses it says 75% of the total cost of NIA services, and end of parenthesis on that. So does that mean that $967,000 is 75% of the total cost of NIA?
Yes,
or
NIA's
that
bill.
this is 75% of the $1,268?
No, the NIA bill for this coming school year is 1.4 million.
Yeah. So that this represents 75% of that 1.4.
Yes.
And obviously we need these other things. If theoretically you could put that whatever we get at 1,268 towards that 1,000 or 1,400,000, right, and have nothing left for anything else. So we basically try to say, put priorities on the number of things that we have outside of that, the 75%.
Yes, Jeff, and I think what I have found is I'm very proud of how we've worked collaboratively with curriculum instruction to take a look at each of our grants, Title I, Title II, and the IDEA grant, and look at the stipulations for each of those grants and see how we can take this pot of money of D428 that we have and look at our priorities and see which one of the grants best fits our costs. And that's how we came up with what you'll hear about it for Title I, Title II, but this is what we've determined for IDEA.
So, which is really a lead into my second question, which is, is there anything notable in this list of things that you have here above? Is there anything notable that you've changed? Is this mostly what you did last year? Is this mostly what you do on a yearly basis, or have you significantly had to change, say, for instance, upping specialized curriculum or upping any number of these other things that took a little bit, like the 107,000 student services grant office support?
Right.
Did you have to change any of those significantly over the course of the last year or two?
To match the district improvement plan, the areas that increased were the ones that I mentioned, the specialized curriculum, the PBIS meetings for the social emotional piece.
Right.
And I'm also just a little bit on the student services office support because of some of the staff needs that we've talked about prior.
So your goal is basically to try to stay as close to that 75% as you can.
And that's what we've had the last 2 years, Jeff. About 75, 76. And I'd have to say last year, this past spring, I did an amendment to the grant that I presented last summer and saw that I had a surplus in some of those areas because we just didn't spend as much as we had anticipated. So I then dumped another 30,000 into the NIA contract.
Okay.
So any opportunity at the end of the year, I'll write an amendment in order to, because I agree with you, as much as we can flow into that NIA contract for those services, the better.
Well, I didn't have a position on it, I was just asking.
No, but that's my position.
Okay.
And I'm always wanting to do that.
Thanks.
Christie, do these line items, do they change or are they pretty much always the same from year to year? You add or subtract those line items?
No, they're the same.
Pretty much the same?
Yep.
Okay.
Just increase or decrease
Okay.
based on our goals.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.
Next, we have Dekalb 428 operating budget, fiscal year 2018, 2019, and this is an informational discussion.
I'll point up here. I'll be somewhat brief. This is kind of just a update and where we're at with our operating budget for 18-19. Last time we looked at this was probably back in February when we were looking at a long-term projection. So this is just kind of a brief update before we look at the tentative budget at the next meeting, where that'll be more comprehensive. Look at everything, but to kind of get you up to date on. Probably the big thing is where we are with our state funding. So just real briefly, I'll go through the state funding formula that was passed back in August of last year. The new formula is tying the school funding to the evidence-based practices of research. And what the state was doing is looking at every district to calculate what their adequacy target is. And that's 800 plus districts. So it did take the state some time to do that. Any new dollars that are allocated by the state each year will go to the districts in most need, with pretty much those two tier 1 and 2 tier districts. And the main part of the funding is that no district loses money or basically are held harmless from the fiscal year 18 funding that we received. So the next slide here is just kind of really briefly what those tiers are. Tier 1 are those districts that are most in need, and they're districts that are about 65% or less in adequacy percentage is the calculation that the state has put together. Then you've got your tier 2s that are less than 90%. Tier 3s are those ones that are almost at 100%, and then tier 4s, they're above 100% in terms of their adequacy, which really means that they're getting most of their dollars from property taxes, from the local perspective rather than from the state. The way the allocation of new dollars works with the new funding formula is that tier 1 districts receive 50% of those funds. So let's say 300 million is allocated, 150 million right away gets distributed to the tier 1 districts. And then the 49%, the other part, or almost half, the other half goes to tier 2 districts. And then there's a little bit that goes to tier 3 and tier 4 districts. And this is of additional funding that the state would
So you landed in tier.
We'll go to that next. Well, let's see. Okay, well, let's go to the progression here. So back in August of 2017 is when it was actually passed. There were some bills that needed to be enacted in between that time before they finished the calculations, just some clarification of language. As they were going through these calculations, they realized, wait a second, that's not, the language really wasn't matching what the spirit of the calculation was supposed to be. So they had some bills that were passed in order to clean up some of that language. That happened in February and April. And then back in May, the new funding formula, they requested more accurate numbers again to get the data ready. So finally in June, final calculations were made. So basically we went a whole fiscal year almost before we really knew what that new funding was going to look like. And I didn't introduce Amir Doka. He's our financial accounting manager. He actually worked for the State Board of Education and did help to work on this formula as well. So he's been very helpful in getting my head straight and how this thing. We're still trying to figure it out. So then, just briefly where we were before the additional funding, we were at 22.8 million was our base funding minimum, which was what we had received fiscal year 17. And what the funding formula did is it was added a bunch of different funding together. So it was general state aid and then those other areas, special ed reimbursement, bilingual, and they lumped all those together to be the evidence-based funding rather than those being separate funding sources. So now this is where we ended up. So we ended up at 58% adequacy. So that put us in tier 1. So we'll be one of those districts that will receive the higher funding, additional funding, one that gets allocated each year. So based on that for fiscal year 18, which is the fiscal year we just ended, we received 2.8 million more in evidence-based funding. So a total of $25.7 million is what we received.
So the whole concept down at the state is give money to people have more need.
Exactly.
In other words,
yes.
So the downside of it is when you have more need, you have more expenses.
Yeah, exactly.
So in theory, this is working out okay for us because we fell into tier 1, and someone who had fallen into tier 2 wouldn't get nearly as much money.
They're getting still a pretty decent chunk. They're still getting almost the other half.
Right.
So we're getting, tier 1 is getting 50% of
Right.
the allocation. Tier 2 is still getting 49% of it.
Right.
So they're kind of like in the middle, but then your tier 2, 3, and 4 are districts that really rely heavily on property tax and local wealth.
Because their needs are not as high.
Right.
I mean, that is to say their population
Right.
isn't like ours where, what is ours, 50% poverty?
Well,
No, I mean, that's part of the problem.
that's part of it.
Yeah.
It takes into consideration your student population. That's one.
Local wealth.
Yeah,
Right.
and local wealth is probably the biggest thing.
Okay.
Yes.
Theoretically, you could have a property tax base that's through the roof. I mean, you have lots of revenue, but you've also got a lot of needy students.
Right.
Sure.
But that doesn't often happen.
Right. And it'll look at that revenue or that population of students and match that up to what you have locally. If you have enough locally to support those students, then you'll be in tier 2 or 3 or 4.
Right.
So
tier 1 shows that you have some issues.
well, I would say issues. You just based on the, I don't want to say we're doing something bad because we're in tier 1, but that basically we have a population of students that need additional services, whether they be bilingual or special education or low income, and we don't have the property tax base that maybe your North Shore districts would have.
Absolutely.
To support it. So it's, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. It's just the state is finally realizing it's time to put dollars in the kid, where a kid lives, what their zip code shouldn't dictate what sort of funding they get.
Right.
So it's really trying to equalize that.
So in the end, we're coming out with 22.5 more?
2.8 million more.
2.8 million more, which is good news.
Yes, if we actually received it, it's in May.
Yeah.
We're not waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And let's talk about how this is going to impact next. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it isn't.
Sorry, Howard.
I was just wondering whether there was any pushback from some of the wealthier districts about taking so much of their money to actually try to meet those needs.
There really wasn't, because initially when the state funding formula was being looked at, that's what they wanted to do. And what they were able to do is compromise in that. That's why everybody's held harmless. They basically said everybody's going to get what they got in the previous fiscal year, whether you be a tier 4 or a tier 1. So there was nobody lost money. That was the main thing.
How does the math work on that?
Yeah, well,
What is that, an adjustment year? This is like a
you
whole
could say
harmless
that.
year?
Yeah, I mean, basically, that fiscal year 17 year, which was last month, was your base year of when things started.
Also, while you acquired information.
Right, exactly, because they needed that time to do the calculations,
Right.
everything, put together. So that is where we stand with the state school funding.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
So again, the next slide, now what we need to figure out is what do we budget for next year? And what I'm suggesting we do is basically budget for what we received in fiscal year 18. And that's really what actually the state is saying we can budget for more. I would not do that yet until I can see it in action and actually see it in the bank. And so by budgeting for the same thing we received this year with that additional 2.8 million, that's what most districts are doing. Even though there are additional funds allocated, we just don't know how they're going to get allocated yet.
And putting that money in escrow, doing something, what would you, I mean, am I hearing this correctly? You're gonna budget for, without the 2.8 in consideration?
No, we'll put the 2.8 that we did receive, because now that's our new base. Once we were originally at the 22 million, now we are getting the additional 2.8, which we did already receive. So now our new base is the 25.6 million. So that's our hold harmless now for the next year. I want to wait to see what the state does is what that additional funding is. Because now the state is going to allocate additional dollars. It's just how are they going to recalculate everything? Because it is a domino effect. And that's why, and they have to have all this data together, because if this district is doing, their local wealth is changing here, and this is down here, once this changes, that changes everything. So everything's connected now. So that's why it takes so long to get these calculations done.
Is this all in place of the standardized, just statewide GSA?
Yes, this completely replaces general state aid, yes.
Will we keep the board informed on how you're gonna redistribute those extra funds?
And well, right now it's helping, if we go to the next slide, actually, it's helping to eliminate a potential deficit that we did have.
Yeah.
So if we look at the projected 18-19, when we're including that 2.8 million, now we're at about a $1.6 million surplus in our operating fund, projected for 18-19. And if we look at our adjusted budget for 17-18 by including that 2.8 million, plus on top of, remember, we did not budget for the last categorical payments from 16-17 because we didn't receive them yet. So we received those dollars too. So we're actually looking at close to a $4 million surplus.
Cindy, is the TIF money also in that?
The TIF surplus?
The 4 million surplus?
Well, 1.5 million surplus is what we received, yeah.
For the revenue.
Yeah, that's included in there. Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
So that's another part of
not the new TIF stuff, not
Right.
anything related to the new TIF,
Right.
that has been incorporated, because that wouldn't get into the 18-19. But for the prior, yes, that is included in there. But that's kind of a one-time anomaly again, because it's really just monies that we didn't budget because we didn't know if the state was going to pay us or not. So,
Cindy, can I back you up for a second?
Yeah.
Do you know what the overall increase in the state revenue to education is?
I think it's about 350 million. That's just, I believe.
That's the increment over the previous year's budget?
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
think
the
it's
whole
about-
harmless and pay additional,
Right,
it costs that much more
right,
for 1 year?
yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And where did they pull that money from?
That's a good question. They probably borrowed, to be honest. They've been doing some borrowing.
Yeah, because when you decide about budget for next year,
Yeah.
the viability of their income stream is,
Well,
I would say, greatly in question.
That is always the question.
At 22%.
So I just wonder, I just have one question, like, if you're the state then, and we fall into the, category that we receive the most help,
Mhm.
when we post a surplus that flies in the face of need, how does that affect their
No.
thinking at all?
No, they're looking strictly at your funding, your revenue stream. They're not looking at, okay, there's nothing that I have seen in the formula, and Amir, you probably know this as well, that says, oh, you have a fund balance of 50 million, you don't need it. No, they're looking at strictly from year to year, how much money you need to run your business.
I don't want to take us down the rabbit hole, but I need to throw this out there. I know it's been a long time since this was first presented. Part of the formula for determining what tier you would go in, the state created a model school, and it had student-to-teacher ratios, student-to-counselor ratios, student-to-school site ratios, etc., all the way down. And based on that model school, that was part of the formula that helped determine what tier you would go into. So my hypothesis is right now, this year we received 2.8 million more, based on the fact that we have very high student to teacher ratios. And that is our new hold harmless number. I believe at some point, our General Assembly, they're going to start asking, how are school districts using those monies? Those school districts that were the most high need based on class size, different ratios. So that reporting, I think, is coming. So it's not like this $2.8 million is just new monies that we're going to be able to, I'll say, play with. I think before long, they're going to say, how have you reduced class size?
What have you done with our money?
That was a need. How have you addressed this issue within your district? Because that was a need that got you into that specific tier.
Yeah, and we did ask.
I think that's coming.
Yeah.
I would anticipate something like that.
Well, they just have to support what the legislature has done. I'm sure legislators want to know that as well. And it's something that, yeah, definitely, Amir asked a question, he said, oh yeah, we'll have something, we just don't know what it was.
Okay.
And then the next slide is really just kind of a quick summary that we show some historical information in terms of where we stood with our revenues and expenditures and our fund balance. And we're projecting right now, at the end of 19, about a 38.13% fund balance to expenditures, which our fund balance policy is 15 to 25%. So we're in good shape there. And that line is staying nice and flat and even kind of creeping up a little, which is nice to see. And again, the question is, how's the state going to continue to fund it? Politically, right now, this is the big topic, funding schools. So hopefully that stays there, especially in election year.
But the fact is, the model's good. The model that was developed by educators or with educators at the table, and Amir, you can speak even more to this than I could. It's a good model. So even if next year only 100 million were to be put in, then they're distributing that to the most high need schools first.
Right.
And we just hope that we don't ever go backwards. But the model's great. It's whether we can fund it or not. And we know the answer to that.
Well, in the long run, you have an unfunded pension liability that's absolutely astronomical.
So then again, I'll just kind of quickly go through the rest of these slides. State payments, again, we're waiting for about 1.4 million for categorical payments, which is basically a lot less than last year. And the main reason for that is because the evidence-based funding has combined a lot of things and we've received all those funds. So we're waiting for just one categorical payment. We were in a workshop today and everybody was like, we don't know what we're going to get. So nobody seems to know when we'll receive those funds. Last year, we didn't get it until like December. But we were waiting for 2 payments last year. We had received one back in May, so it's a little better. And then evidence-based funding, we've received everything of that for last year, and we're including the same total with no additional funding in the 18-19 budget. So our timeline with our budget is we will approve a budget for public inspection at the August 7th meeting, so the tentative budget. It'll be on display and we post something in the paper to let them know we'll have our budget hearing, which will be at our September 18th board meeting. And then that's when the budget would get adopted. So that's the legal timeline for that.
If I can make a comment here, I was here a year ago and it didn't sound as good as this. I think we've improved our outlook for temporarily. If you don't consider where we're getting the money.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's as long as the state will continue to, and then that's the question everybody has on their mind. How are they going to do it? Number one,
we can predict that.
Yeah. I mean, but honestly, like Jay mentioned, I think the formula makes a lot of sense. It's just so much more in line with.
You know the answer to the question. They get the money from the taxpayer. Sooner or later, one way or another, there's no other way or no other place. The only thing you can do is expand the economy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue, please.
And then just, again, the last page, just some unknowns, and these are kind of repetitive, but something we always want to keep on our radar. We don't know what that additional allocation is going to look like, so we'll wait on that. property tax freezes, at this workshop today, they said, it's not something that's a lot of chatter right now, but it's always something that could, rear its head again, so something you want to keep an eye on. And again, pension payments that cost shift. They're gonna have to solve that issue at some point. It's just keeps getting pushed back, just don't know when that's gonna hit again. And then the delayed payments with the controller as of the 10th is about 6.8 million. This time last year was 14.8 billion. So, I guess, that's better, but again, I think they borrow a lot to take care of this. And
Thank you.
thank you.
Right, next we have district improvement plan, Jeannie Craven, and this is an informational one.
The great news is, you guys have seen almost all of this. So, Amir, can you pull that up? There we go. Again, the good news is you've seen almost all this in other presentations, so we'll go quick. Can you just flip? Just as a reminder, back in, and I saw my first error established in the fall of 2018, I think it was last fall, so it was 2017. We had a retreat at Kish College. We set these 5 goals as the board goals. And as you'll see in what the work that we've done over the last year is our district improvement plan ties into the goals that the board has written. So everything should be aligned to the mission, to the board goals, and that's what we've accomplished. Next, please. You're going to see 4 goals, and I use this visual because these goals aren't, or these focus areas aren't in isolation, and they're not in silos, if you will. The entire school improvement plan, the district improvement plan, is just like this rope. It's all intertwined. And if you look at each strand of the rope the rope itself is intertwined. So all of the goals that we've written are not out here in silos. It's all in one piece. Next, please. So our focus areas, and again, you've heard this, our diversity plan, social emotional learning, the new ESSA plan, the new ESSA state plan that's come out, and district communication plan. Those are the 4 areas of focus as we move into next year. The diversity plan, again, we've presented this. The 7 specific goals within the diversity plan. I'm not going to go back through them all tonight. So those are 7 areas that we'll start to work into. And again, when I say 7 areas, it doesn't mean that because goal number 1 is on top and goal number 7 is on bottom, that they're in any one specific order. It's what is going to be determined as a priority within the diversity plan group. Next, please. Our social emotional learning plan, which you will hear more about from Christy in an upcoming meeting, but the 4 focus areas. Ensuring that all students learn in a supportive, equity-based, positive classroom environment, that we're integrating social emotional learning into our academic instructional processes, provide explicit instruction for social emotional learning skills among all students. Again, a lot of social emotional focus. We had NTSS relationship with the state board this year, working on an NTSS plan, multi-tier system supports. We also we've talked extensively about RTI, as Christy did a little bit tonight. So that all blends into this. And then goal 4, evaluate the effectiveness of our social emotional plan as we move forward. And that's going to be part of our entire SIP plan, that you're always in that plan, do, study, act mode. Next, please.
I do have a question about
Yes.
that. Since we did meet, this is one of the areas that I, obviously feel really strong about, the social emotional component. Now, I do have a question directed for Christy more so than why or do we have a plan to embed the social emotional standards into the curriculum? Because teachers could be doing this on a day-to-day basis. It's not hard. It's not. It's just an added component that addresses this as a whole.
Yes, and we will, yes, great question, which would lead into the whole social emotional plan. There are 3 three parts to the social emotional plan, and one is embedding the SEL learning standards.
K through 12, every teacher.
Yes. And then the other is direct, and then the other is more about that social justice piece. That's also part of social emotional. Okay, so there's 3 legs to the stool.
And teachers will receive support in understanding how they can embed this in their curriculum.
Yes, we're working with it's very collaborative between CNI and student services, very collaborative. I'm
Again,
actually
back
very
to that
proud of that.
visual, a lot of that is also
Mhm.
woven into diversity. The Illinois ESSA plan, I know that we presented on this not too awfully long ago. 6 things that we have to really hone down on as we look at what ESSA has laid out for us. We have to first create our baseline data based on how we're going to be evaluated. And I have, these are hot links, and we've showed these before, what the academic indicators are and the student success and school quality indicators, because those are the 2 rubrics that school districts or that schools within a district are going to be rated by. Again, the school quality indicators and of course academic indicators. Goal number 2, we're going to have to complete what we're calling a gap analysis, looking at where we fall after we create our baseline data, and what are the gaps within our system, within the different buildings, how we align with the ESSA plan. Then number 3, create local PACE framework. What a PACE framework would be, it really ties into the college and career readiness, going all the way back to 6th grade, starting with the end in mind. What does a student want to do and be when they grow up? And what does that pathway or that course pathway look like in their educational journey? So that would be the PACE framework without getting too far into that. Again, it's hot linked on the PowerPoint if you want to go back and look at that.
And I'm sorry, who would be driving that? Counselors? Who drives that particular train?
Well, the PACE framework it would be a combination. If you're looking at a math department, again, it's the math department working with curriculum instruction. Much of this is in place, but it's going back and looking at what are those pathways through the academic pathways through our curriculum.
And channeling them, and through discussion, channeling, helping students find a pathway, or, I mean.
Yes, so.
Directing them in that pathway?
Just in very general terms, when we talk about students, we have students that have career ambitions that's going to require a 4-year degree, post-high school degree.
Right.
We have students that are going to be looking for that associate's degree, a pathway that's going to lead to an associate's degree. We have some students, actually 4, some students that are going into the military services and, using the military as a vehicle to something else. And then students that are going to be looking to enter the career field.
Right.
So working with students and what do those different pathways look like based on the career choice that you're looking at. So certainly the counselors will be involved, but as we do our analysis, where are we missing areas? Do we have departments that may have some gaps for students that are, and we're not going to have an answer for every pathway. You break it down into those areas. Is your career choice going to require a 4-year degree? What is it that, I think I want to be an electrical engineer, and let's map out what that pathway is going to look like.
Yeah, it's going to be hard in 6th grade to have that kid be knowing that. But what we're going to do is develop that over a period of time, right?
And I agree. And in fact, a statistic that I've heard twice now on 2 different college campuses is that upwards to 65 to 70% of all freshmen, college freshmen, are going to change their major. So moms and dads, when you get that phone call, don't be freaked out when your son or daughter says, I don't think I want to be this anymore, I think I want to be this. Most of the time it stays, the choices stay within the same career cluster, the 16 different career clusters. Most of the time,
they'll stay maybe within a health field career cluster.
Right.
But, I thought I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I don't think I want to do that. Now I want to go into this area. Again, most of the time it stays in the same cluster, but not necessarily the same.
A lot of times because they've already taken classes in that cluster and they've decided they don't like that career path and they say, I think I'll do something else, but I've already taken these classes. So, I mean, there's a lot of mobility in this situation and it's a lot of, this complex program. I mean, it's a complex.
But many of our students have a pretty good general idea when they're at least young in high school, whether or not this particular area is of an interest in them.
Right.
And
We
the
want to
Naviance
encourage
program that we had James Horn here speaking about, this is another tool. He's got career cruising, we're moving to Naviance. It's another career exploration tool to help students start to explore. There's a lot of things out there kids don't even know about.
It's wonderful for us to get involved in that because
So our job is to expose kids to what's out there and help them find what they're interested in.
I was just curious as to where we were driving that train, and it sounds like a group plan. I mean, it's a big deal.
Goal 5, obviously, as I mentioned, we're working on the multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, and 6, continue implementation of best practice through our curriculum technology initiative. So those are the 6 goals under our ESSA plan. I did skip over investigate future-ready framework. And I say investigate because there's a small group of us that will be attending a workshop in Naperville in September. The Future Ready framework is a school improvement framework that's really aligned to ESSA. So we're truly investigating that. It was brought to us by Ben Bale. And so again, a group of us are going to be at a workshop looking at that. Next, please. The district communication plan, Ben and Ms. Bickley have already presented on that, and these were the 4 recommendations, which again, we'll continue to be working on those. Most importantly, telling our own story, telling the great things that are going on in our district, finding ways to continue to push out all the positive things that are going on. And the last slide, questions.
Well, I'm on that committee, communication committee, and on this goal 4, if you get back to that slide, go to the last one. Consider employing a public relations communication specialist. Sycamore has one, from what I understand, has one. Not sure if it's full-time. I think that an interim step may be directing someone at 50%, have 50% of their duties be that person. I mean, it may not be that we jump right into it, but it seems like a possibility would be that we might start with 50% or something.
And there's also options of third-party providers.
Right.
Have not even, I'll be honest, I haven't even started to look into that.
We got a ways to go.
We got a couple other irons in the fire. So those are the areas that as we move into this next school year, keeping in mind that, there's a lot in here. You talked about the diversity plan, social emotional plan, the whole ESSA piece. There's a lot in this plan. This isn't a 1-year, one and done. This is a multi-year plan that, and I don't want to overuse this, but it will continue to be a living, breathing document as we work the plan, do, study, and act model of implementing and reviewing, and sometimes you 86 things, and sometimes you just make tweaks. So that's the plan moving forward. There's no other questions. Eric.
So have you looked at the cost of this? I mean, we haven't done something as comprehensive as this in the past. Is there a concept yet for what components cost something, and if they do cost something, how much more they would cost? And other things that have been done previously.
You know, most of what has been presented here, and I know that was a question with the diversity plan. You know, what are the costs? With the SAPs, you know, if we find that we have a glaring gap in one of our curriculums, then, you know, we'll have to examine that, but it doesn't always mean that it's money to fix. I'll be honest, that's a good question. I'll have to go back and kind of think about that, but I don't see any glaring expenditures in here.
I mean, some of this, as far as I can see, has never been done, and so it can be hard to put a cost on that if it's never been done. But at the same time, you know, the outcome or your intended outcome, we've been looking for these things for a long while. So you might know something about what we spent historically, and what sort of results or maybe no result.
Well, the intended outcome is right here.
Yeah.
That it's about kids, and it's about when our students go across the stage at graduation, that they're really ready to pursue whatever their next ambition is. And, you know, it's, you know, helping kids, you know, with the social emotional piece. It's the whole diversity piece. It's, you know, the academic piece built into ESSA. You know, are we truly building, are we addressing the whole child and really focusing on all of that as we move them through their educational journey, getting ready to leave us? And, you know, we want students to be ready to pursue their next ambition.
Mr. Graven?
Yes.
I'd like to respond to that in regards to, like, for example, the social emotional goals. Really, as I presented earlier about IDEA, it's a shifting of dollars. It's taking these goals and just saying, oh, we spent it on this before, we're going to put some monies in here and there. We're shifting our focus. And it's not additional dollars, it's just using what we have in these ways. That's what I'm suggesting.
Many times it is a reprioritize.
Yeah. That would be for IDEA, Title I, Title II. We're looking at those dollars and how are we going to allocate those dollars to these goals.
Well, another thing I was thinking is kind of interwoven with this, you know, our school improvement plan as a result of what we recently learned about what's, you know, I forget what the terminology is, whether achieving the state's. What's it? Underperforming schools, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so how does that, is that a subset of this?
That is part of all of it, but specifically the more of the ESSA plan. And interestingly, we know the four buildings that were identified as underperforming, we have not yet been told why. Now, if we go back to each school is put into a different tier. You know, the top tier is the top 5% or 10%. The second tier were those who weren't the top tier, but they weren't the third tier. The third tier is where we would find underperforming schools. And what that typically, what that was in tier 3, it was that if the school had a subgroup that was performing at the same level or worse than the lowest 5% of the Title I schools. So, because the bottom tier were the lowest performing schools of the Title I schools. So, we have some tier 3 schools, which means we have some subgroups that didn't perform well. So, as soon as that is shared with us, we're then going to be able to start digging into that data.
I was surprised when I saw Malta was included because that used to be our top performing school, but that was before we did redistricting. Well, I would guess that it's a subgroup that pulled down the average, so to speak.
And we'll be able to report out more on that as that is shared with us.
Yeah, but very quickly, I see something that I didn't see when we had that workshop that I think needs to be included sometime, somewhere, that we need a safe working environment for our children and for our teachers both. I mean, safe working environment, a nurturing, safe working environment really I think it needs to be included in our thoughts, because that seems, I mean, it certainly is apropos of some of the issues that we're dealing with. So I think we need to somewhere include that
So you're
somehow.
suggesting that we have another retreat sometime in the fall and revisit these goals?
Well, I think we need a retreat for this, just simply because we need to update on certain things, but I think that that's an issue that I've had discussions with other board members about, as far as safety, security, that kind of stuff. And we don't really have that committee in place. So yeah, at some point, I'm just saying that I'm looking at this and I'm saying something that, I see all this other positive stuff and I'm saying, we really need to start thinking of that as an overall mission, is because teachers don't want to feel unsafe, children don't want to see it feel unsafe, they don't want to.
We do have a safety task force.
Say again?
We do have a safety task force.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the non-business consent agenda.
Thank
This is
goodness.
an action item that the Board of Education approved the non-business consent agenda items A through D. Do we have a motion?
So, second.
Okay.
So
Any
take your pick,
questions?
as to which one of them.
Questions? All right, roll call, please.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Pierre Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Kenya Hernandez,
Yes.
Craig Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Next is the business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the business consent agenda items A through D. Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Pierre Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Kenya Hernandez,
Yes.
Craig Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Next is business and finance, and this is an action item that the Board of Education approve the contract with Andy Frame Servicing of Aurora, Illinois for 1 year with the option to bring forth to the board to renew for up to 2 consecutive years. And this is an action item. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All right, roll call, please.
Valerie Kenya Hernandez,
Yes.
Craig Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Pierre Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes. Okay, next we have new business and administration, release of closed session minutes for public inspection. This is an action item that the Board of Education not authorize the release of any minutes of closed meetings for public inspection at this time due to confidentiality reasons in order to protect the public interest or the privacy of individuals. We have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Do we have any way in place of redacting information that would otherwise be considered private, so that we could make some of the discussions in closed meetings available for discussion?
I'll have to ask.
I think that's a valid point.
And one of our goals is transparency.
Yeah.
We should be looking at that. Which meetings are we,
It's a December,
at this point, we're not releasing?
no, we're not releasing, but it's your December.
Probably 6 months behind or something like that.
There's different things, I mean, different types of things in closed session. One is the suit issue. I would think that when you're under obligation under suit, you're legally
It's still
obliged.
being litigated, I understand.
Yeah, let's not have a discussion at this time.
Whoa.
Yeah, let's-
Can I, the question's been raised, can we redact some of the information in closed session minutes?
You're
I
gonna look
will,
into it.
I will talk to our school
Excellent.
council and I will get that answer to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I still need a roll call.
Craig Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Pierre Millet,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Kenya Hernandez.
Yes.
Next, we have communication liaison differential. And this is an action item that the Board of Education approve the communication liaison differential for the 2018-2019 school year at a cost of $10,000, $518.83. We have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Just a quick question. This is just for 1 year, correct? And
Correct.
this will have to be negotiated in the contract next year for it to continue on board.
Money well spent.
Roll call?
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Karen Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
and Rick Smith.
Yes.
Next, we have District 428 Accelerated Placement Act procedures. And this is an action item that the Board of Education approve the District 428 Accelerated Placement Act procedures as presented. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion?
What drives, I know you brought that to us last night, but could I have a review of that, just a short review of that?
What drives it?
Yeah, I mean, why are we doing this now? And we have
This
done
was-
before.
This was one of the bills that came out of the past cycle from our state legislators.
So it's a requirement by legislation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Any other?
And what are some of the procedures, a pre-student plan or something that you could provide, advanced placement procedure, what are we doing there?
What we had to identify is a process by which we would evaluate a student or students who, if there was a request that their child was accelerated. So the process had to be identified and the tools that we would use.
And have we done that?
Yes.
Yes, it's on. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Karen Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Rick Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Next, we have the 2018-2019 Parent-Student Handbook revisions. And this is an action item that the Board of Education approve the 2018-2019 Parent-Student Handbook with the changes as presented.
I have a discussion.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Go ahead.
Obviously with what was presented today, or public comment, what was shared, I have a question about that. I honestly had not read that, what she shared with us about what currently is in our handbook about residency. So with that, I would like to kind of look into it further to see if it aligns with what we're moving forward with our residency. I mean, especially as we're, obviously voting on revisions at this particular moment.
Well, we also have that's in the board policy manual.
Okay.
The residency, Tim, is not outlined in the student handbook, correct?
No, there's no changes. So what's generally presented on an annual basis to the board are any changes to the student handbook.
Okay.
So with something that's board policy, we try to mirror that in the handbook. So
Okay.
I guess what I would suggest, what Jamie's saying is, if it's board policy, we would want to match that in the handbook. Now, if board policy changes, that would automatically change the handbook.
But I don't think residency is addressed in the student handbook.
Okay, so you have no section on the handbook on residency that you know of, Tim?
I can look really quickly, but I don't, I really don't.
Shouldn't be.
There might be some vague.
I looked at it.
Because
Last
I
one.
remember reading it once, and I remember reading something about.
There might be residency in the area of like interscholastic participation.
That I do remember, because we talked about that, I remember with students who are homeschooled and things like that. And I get that portion, but I'm just saying it needs to be something flowing that's representative of what we have.
I'm not sure that's appropriate for the handbook particularly.
The thing that's closest to it is school attendance areas. So it essentially defines it defines what's specific, it defines and references what we use for residency requirements to enter the state of the district.
And people were confused about that before. They were talking about being a resident of the area that they were in the school of. So, I mean, that's a completely different issue.
Yes.
But that was confusing to somebody. I'm not sure whether it needs to be clarified, but I think it's pretty clear. But somebody was just misunderstanding, saying, hey, Jefferson as opposed to.
To your point,
say, Brooks.
To what was presented here in public comment.
We have also been working with Kathy Vanderbrook from Henshaw on just reviewing and, I don't know if I would say cleaning up, but realigning some of our forms that will be brought to the board at some point. We haven't brought them here yet, but those forms will be brought to the board for review.
Anything that stands out changes?
The only, not necessarily, it does, a little bit hinges on, what Carrie had talked about the last meeting as far as making sure that we added to the holiday parties policy that we added, PTOs and PTAs can do their own thing after school essentially, which is in there. I think it's on the 717 document. As well as it kind of hinges on the Accelerated Placement Act and pending approval on that. That, assuming that it's approved tonight, would also be, it's kind of a package deal as far as that's concerned. I would mention as far as,
Hey guys, keep it down.
oh no, it's, as far as residency itself, the entire residency discussion the last several months pertains to out-of-district versus in-district residency. What's addressed in the handbook is school attendance areas. So essentially it says, there are boundaries within the DeKalb school district, and students would, unless there's IEPs or other extenuating circumstances, students would attend where they live within the school district. So residency, out of district residency, and that whole thing is not addressed within the handbook. It essentially just says that we have residency boundaries within the DeKalb school district, and you will attend that unless you have special needs.
Well, I think that what we have to do is, with a student handbook, in my opinion, is that we have to say, the assumption is the student handbook is for a student that's part of our district. I mean, we don't really set out a handbook for people that aren't from out of our district. I mean, they're from out of our district. So I would make the assumption that we're talking about, once you're in, here's your handbook, right? Once you're part of it, here's your handbook. Okay.
Thanks for addressing.
We'll get back to a question about holiday parties. So with the changes that are made, I was going to be sure it's simply then is this talking about during school hours that the kids, if they want a Valentine's Day party, they can hand out Valentine's Day cards, or what are we talking about? Is this Christmas tree? We're on a Christmas tree at least now, or?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I just wanted to be clear about that. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Chair Millat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Finn Hernandez.
Yes.
Craig Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Jeff Hall.
Yes.
So we have partnership between Equal Opportunity Schools and DeKalb High School. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the reallocation of district funds that have been used to purchase AP materials to the partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools with no additional funds needed. Do we have a motion?
With discussion. Second.
Discussion.
That part of it, that is to say refunding or directing money from the AP to resources for the AP over to it. I have two questions. One is that, and the other is that this is really, it seems to me from our discussion that this is something where it's really just development. I mean, that is to say, we are teaching or retraining people to be more sensitive to the needs of a wider range of people, to bring them into the AP umbrella. Is that what we're talking about, Jenny?
Yes, so I'm going to answer your second question first.
Good.
It is really changing how we look at what an AP student is. And so with our counselors and our teachers, our parents as well, and our students, just opening up that door and the possibility of taking those AP classes to increase our diversity.
So it's more of a reach out program saying these things are available, and you need to kind of give these things consideration, AP, that you need to give this consideration if you want to broaden your horizons in various areas, correct? Something like that?
But it's also restructuring the courses.
Yes, yeah, and we will take a look, we're going to take a look at our data in terms of who's taking our AP classes. And then from our data, then start with those strategies in recruitment and having those conversations with parents, teachers, that sort of thing, counselors.
What Valerie just said is of concern to me. So got the development part, got the reaching out, that kind of stuff. Restructuring AP courses, is that part of this as well?
No, because College Board dictates what an AP course should look like.
Right.
And you have to follow what College Board says.
The AP structure, which is based on college, I mean, dictates from the college, right? I mean, accreditation sort of.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Those have to stay the same.
They have very
So
strict
we're throwing a
guidelines.
wider net,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yes, we're gonna
Correct.
cast a wider net.
But when I spoke to Vicki Tuscan, when I came in to meet with you, she said that truly it is keeping with the guidelines, but also looking at how the program could improve based on adding different things that could possibly work for students of all demographics.
In
Correct?
terms of what the class would, those discussions and stuff would look like, yes.
So that's what I meant by restructuring, not restructuring and changing the program, restructuring how we apply some things or how we make it available, and how we approach different things.
How would you do that, say, for calculus or something like that? I mean, as far as changing the delivery of the class and material, I mean, how does that get changed? That would in some way help somebody that's not in it already or not interested in it already.
Carrie, I can't answer that question. That's why we're gonna have experts working with our teachers.
So they somehow know this.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And is this,
EOS.
as long as I'm asking questions if I can, is this a one-shot deal? I mean, do we hire this company for 1 year to give us professional development and whatever else they're going to do? Or is this an ongoing, will we be, asking them to come back year after year?
We may, we'll have to see how this year goes. I know in conversations with EOS, most buildings make a 2-year commitment. We're just committing to 1 year, but most buildings make a 2-year commitment because with most schools, you're well on your way then to creating that equal opportunity for all of our students for AP courses.
And, well, I guess I got a bunch of questions, but in the video that was shown last time at the informational part, there was a good bit of that video dedicated to International Baccalaureate as well as AP. So is there any International Baccalaureate component to this? No, not at all.
No, we're strictly AP.
Okay. All right.
And, sorry, there's going to be, the concept is, this is probational, that it sounds like it, 1 year, it's probational. So one would make the assumption that they're going to come back to us at the end of this probationary period and say, here's what we have achieved in that period of time. Here are some results. We're looking at this, this, and this, correct?
And Jenny, why do we need to go outside, to a contractor? Do we not have the capacity to do it inside?
We don't.
We don't.
We don't.
That's a quick answer.
And this
Yeah.
this is an opportunity, and we talked to other schools, and it has worked with other schools that have very similar demographics to ours. So,
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Valerie Boone Hernandez.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Jeff Algren.
Yes.
Carrie Millette.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes. And the meeting will be adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
I won't ask.
Is it 9 o'clock yet?